We look at post-draft free agent targets for the Baltimore Ravens and how they can fill out some of the remaining holes on their roster. All that and more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here as always and making us a part of your day, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes a video form on YouTube and an audio form wherever you get your show. So be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form. You can find us 5 days per week, plus more. We do some bonus content, live shows, bonus episodes. So we have Ravens news analysis updates, all that coming here for you on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are back Taco Tuesday here on Locked On Ravens, talking more, of course, Baltimore Ravens football in the offseason that seemingly never sleeps. OTA started off yesterday for the Ravens on Monday, so we got first glimpses of Derrick Henry in a Ravens uniform. We'll talk about that in the final part of the show and just what to expect from there. But we're going to be diving into quote-unquote post-draft. I know we're like 3 weeks away or 3 weeks over the draft. We've been there. We've talked about the draft class and whatnot, but we didn't go over free agent targets post-draft yet. We started to see some of the free agents who weren't signed before the draft start to go off the board. We're going to be talking about who the Ravens could be looking at when it comes to the free agents still left on the board and whether they should add a position here and a position there. So we'll start with more positionally based things and then move into some of the players in the first segment. And then we'll just talk about if the Ravens need to add more, whether it be safety or defensive line or whatever it is. Are the Ravens set with what they have, or is it imperative they add more before the draft, whether it is a free agent target, a trade, whatever it is? So we'll talk about all that here today. But first, let's get into some post-draft free agent targets. And again, let's start positional-wise. Where could I see the Ravens adding somebody? Well, I think, first of all, safety is a big one. You have Marcus Williams, you have Kyle Hamilton. The issue isn't with your starting group. But as we've talked about here on Locked On Ravens, the Ravens, they didn't draft a safety high in the 2024 draft. They also lost Geno Stone to free agency. Daryl Worley still a free agent. So your depth is Sanusi Kane, who was your 7th-round pick, and Bo Braid, who is an undrafted guy. That right now is what your safety room looks like. And I get, in today's NFL, there's positional versatility, especially with the secondary, right? A lot of these corners can go and play safety. Safeties can go play corner. It's not like people are just limited to one position. We're starting to see positionless defense, and that's super valuable in today's NFL. But is that Ardarius Washington playing safety for you? What does that look like? I think the Ravens, it would benefit them if they were to add. It doesn't have to be, a quote-unquote third starter, but someone who is at least high-level backup quality, like Geno Stone, for example, who is going to get snaps in Cincinnati, going to play a huge role in that defense. And he earned that, right? Because he comes in, fills in for Marcus Williams. And I've preached this forever. The way the Ravens defense operated last season, part of the reason why they were so good, in fact, a huge reason why they were so good, was because of the way that Geno Stone slotted in seamlessly for Marcus Williams. And I'm not saying, I'm not counting out Sanusi Kane, I'm not counting out Bo Braid, but it feels like a little bit of a risk. And so we're a couple months out. This is post-draft, a couple weeks after the draft is over. And there is still a pretty good amount of quality safeties out there because it feels like, the position just hasn't gained a ton of traction this offseason. Maybe the Ravens want to add a veteran offensive lineman to the fold as well. I don't know. They already are going to have some tough decisions in terms of maybe they have to get rid of one of their younger players that they have high hopes for, but there's not a lot of room in that offensive line group. So if they add another veteran, that pushes another young guy down that maybe they don't want to get rid of. But if you upgrade your roster, you upgrade your roster. If you have an opportunity, I mean, the Ravens are in a window right now. They're in a competitive window, and that's one of the challenges. And I guess it is a good problem to have for Eric DeCosta. But one of the challenges Eric DeCosta has is navigating competing with development. And I think, competing takes precedent over a lot of things, but also you can't just go all in and bring in only veterans and those types of players. So to me, offensive line could be in the equation. Wouldn't be shocked if they didn't add one, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they did. Other positions, I know people are still clamoring for a veteran wide receiver. I know Michael Thomas is one of those names, and we'll talk about names. Right now, the Ravens have their 6 wide receivers if they want it, but to me, I don't think a guy like Tylan Wallace should be the reason why you don't sign another guy if you feel like if you're Baltimore, it's a fit. For example, Michael Thomas, I'm a big believer of the 6 wide receiver rule, and that's something the Ravens have pretty much preached over the last handful of seasons, not every single year, but for the most part. So if they were to bring in a Michael Thomas or someone along those lines, Tylan Wallace is probably looking, is the odd man out at that point. So veteran receiver also, I feel like they could add there. But other than that, I don't necessarily see them adding anywhere else. I mean, maybe outside linebacker, but they already have a ton of edge depth. And that would, again, I don't see how even guys like Millie can make this roster right now. And that's the guy they really like. So who gets pushed out if that's the case? Maybe a special teams inside linebacker. And so, again, I kind of hone in on safety here. And so if we're honing in on that, let's get to the remaining safety still on the board here. Justin Simmons is the name everybody is watching out for. Former Denver Broncos safety, still an incredible player, physical guy. A little bit of a different skill set than Geno Stone in terms of a quote-unquote backup. I mean, he's a starting level player. He could go and earn a starting role in a lot of different defenses. But he'd be, I think, the dream scenario for people, and certainly for me if I'm thinking about the Ravens. Then you have other guys like Eddie Jackson, Marcus May, Micah Hyde, Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, etc., Kareem Jackson, Keanu Neal. So there are a bunch of different skill sets. Adrian Amos was someone the Ravens were interested in, but then Chuck Clark tore his ACL last season, and that was with the Jets. So the Jets swooped in and gave Amos a bigger role than the Ravens could have offered him. And so that's where he went. So maybe they revisit that. So those are all options for the safety aspect of things. Talking wide receivers, again, I mentioned Michael Thomas is the remaining name. Hunter Renfrow, who his career trajectory has been pretty crazy when you think about it. Mecole Hardman, Corey Davis, Julio Jones, Russell Gage. So not a ton left. I think Thomas is probably it if they want to take a swing on a guy like Martavis Bryant potentially, but I don't feel like Baltimore is in that. I know that there was a whole conversation about that with Josh Gordon. I'm like, oh, they should take a swing on Josh Gordon. They should take a swing on Josh Gordon, someone who had off-field issues, but is super talented. That's the same thing with Martavis Bryant. Bryant hasn't played in years, so we're going to see how that all unfolds, but I don't know. It feels not in Baltimore's wheelhouse. So I feel like if they were to sign a receiver, it would probably be Michael Thomas. I also mentioned some of the offensive linemen, Donovan Smith, David Bakhtiari, DJ Humphries, Jason Peters, some of those vets there for offensive tackles. You have other guys on, Dalton Reisner's been a name a lot of people have been circling on in terms of guard. Do they add a veteran guard like a Reisner who has versatility? I think that's probably the offensive line name everybody's looking at. Centers, they don't need that. I mean, Connor Williams is quality coming off an injury, though, so I don't necessarily think that's an option. Plus, they already have Nick Semick, and I don't think, they're going to probably give him some sort of like the backup, quote-unquote backup center, or at least try to here. I think Emmanuel Ogbah would be awesome, personally, but I just don't know if there's room on the defensive line, There are really good. I mean, Calais Campbell's still a free agent as well. If they want to go down that route, would be a nice reunion story, but I wouldn't necessarily think. I don't think they're going after a Shaq Leonard, any of those guys. So I really think a guy like Justin Simmons, a guy like Michael Thomas, Dalton Reisner, those are kind of the players that a lot of people have been circling on. If you're the Ravens and just what I've seen post-draft, that doesn't mean the Ravens are interested or not interested. I don't know if that's the case for any of those guys, but in my opinion, I think the Ravens, they are in a position where most of their roster is pretty much set at this point. They've lost a lot. They have tried to replenish that mostly through the draft. Derrick Henry is the big free agent signing, but there are still other opportunities. And we saw last season Eric DeCosta get busy after the draft. So coming to the second part of the show, we'll talk about if the Ravens absolutely need to add more or if they can get by with the roster they have right now and be successful with it. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. I've had plenty of frustrating ticket buying experiences, especially for NFL games. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good. Sometimes I couldn't find last-minute tickets. Other times there were just no good deals at all. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. And for me, the NFL schedule release obviously was last week. There are a bunch of high-profile games on the Ravens schedule. Obviously, the Chiefs in week 1 is going to be huge at Arrowhead. You got divisional primetime games. The Bengals will be huge. Steelers, Saturday football. And then you got like Texans on Christmas. So there are a lot of games that I'd love to go to for the Ravens there. But the Gametime app has it covered, especially with all the features that it has and the experience as well. So you get last minute deals on the Gametime app. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Plus, the Gametime app, again, that experience is great, and there are a bunch of features that definitely pleasantly surprised me as well, such as flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Someone's buy again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. We're back for our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking on this Tuesday. Again, really appreciate everybody making Locked On Ravens part of your day. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form and audio form. We talked about some post-draft free agent targets, some positional needs, some actual players who could fill those voids. But do the Ravens actually have to add more? We've had this conversation in different iterations, I would say, over the course of the offseason, and especially once free agency started, first couple days weren't super active outside of Derrick Henry, weren't really active at all outside of Derrick Henry in terms of decently big free agent signings. So have the Ravens done a good enough job of weathering the losses and they can just kind of go with what they have, or do they need to add more? I definitely think the Ravens should add more. I think that's probably my stance on the whole situation. In fact, it is my stance on the situation. We know that Eric DeCosta likes to operate like this. We know the Ravens love to operate like this. Compensatory when it comes to that deadline where free agents no longer count against that formula, it's now gone. So I expect the Ravens to be more active. Does that mean they will be? No. But I just feel like there are a couple of other areas, like we talked about in that first segment, where it'd be really nice for them to add somebody else. There's just a couple of roles, and it feels like there's a theme for the Ravens, at least for what they want their roster to be this season, where they're still trying to be competitive. They want to win the Super Bowl. There's no doubt about that, but they're going to go young at a couple different positions, wide receiver being the one that I think a lot of people are kind of like, is this really going to work? Where Zay Flowers is your one, and I don't think it's on like Zay Flowers. I don't think the problem with people, so Zay can't do it. Zay can't do it. We've seen Zay Flowers. His rookie season was awesome. Now he has to build on that, right? It's not automatically, he had a great rookie season, so he's going to have every single other year be awesome too. He's going to have to build on that, but I have confidence they can make that work on the field 100%. But it's Bateman as a number 2 receiver that a lot of people have some maybe worry about. Now it's definitely a risk. I think it's something that Baltimore is they believe in it. But they've been kind of telegraphing that all offseason, where there were the rumors about trading him and, they're going to move him for an Ayuk or move him for Sutton or whatever it was, one of those top flight veteran receivers who have been rumored to be available all offseason. But they were bringing in guys like Michael Gallup and Josh Reynolds, etc. for visits, signing Deontay Hardy, more of a special teams guy, obviously. They weren't bringing in, like Odell, even a Michael Thomas. Those are guys that you're like, is that going to be the number 2 receiver? It was like last season. We didn't really know who the number 2 or number 3 was, between Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman. I guess was flip-flopping the whole year of, oh, okay, Odell's the number 2. Oh, no, it's Bateman. Oh, no, it's Odell. It's Bateman. So Bateman, there's plenty of belief there, but that's part of the theme where, okay, they're going to go young because Nelson Aguilar is a veteran. Is Tez Walker your number 4 receiver? Is Deontay Hardy your number 4? Is Tylan Wallace your number 4? Those are your other 3 outside of Flowers, Bateman, and Aguilar. So what's that going to look like? So not only is your number 2 receiver, that's somewhat of a risk. Bateman has talent. I'm still a Bateman believer, but we can acknowledge it's still a risk that they're going that route instead of maybe going with a more proven guy. But look, year 4 breakout for Rashad Bateman 100% could happen. And honestly, with the flashes we've seen, it's 100% like, oh, this could really happen. But that is still a risk. On the offensive line, going a little bit younger, right? Roger Rosengarten is the favorite to win that right tackle job. You're probably getting some combination of Ben Cleveland and Andrew Voorhees as your 2 guards. So considering all the veteran power they had, Kevin Zeitler, Morgan Moses, John Simpson, that's a step in the other direction. They're going a bit younger there, but they're also getting more athletic in doing so. So I feel like that's what Baltimore wanted, but still they're going to need some time to gel and figure things out. Kevin Zeitler was super solid for them, and it's going to be great in Detroit. Morgan Moses, was up and down, but I think had more ups than downs in Baltimore. Simpson was a lot better as a fill-in than I thought. I don't think he's a super big loss or anything, but he was a veteran who, had been in a couple of big situations in his career. So going younger, I think, again, there are going to be some downgrades and upgrades there at the same time, but that's another youth movement thing. So for Baltimore, it's also the balance of just having someone like Lamar Jackson on that huge contract. And it's not just Lamar. And I try to say this every time because I think sometimes people think I'm just pigeonholing it all on Lamar. And it's like, oh, well, Lamar has his contract, so that's the reason why the Ravens can't sign guys. That's not the case. The Ravens, one, can still sign guys, right? Just because Lamar's on this big contract doesn't mean that the Ravens all of a sudden are just tied down and can't do anything. And two, it's not just Lamar's on a big contract. Lamar is the biggest contract out of everybody, but they have a bunch of guys on big contracts. And I think that Eric DeCosta, Pat Moriarty, those guys have done an awesome job of maneuvering well. If one big contract comes in, another is set to expire to be able to bring in that big contract, especially when it gets expensive without having to do a bunch of crazy. Because we haven't really seen the Ravens restructure a bunch of guys here. I mean, Ronnie Stanley obviously chopped the year off of that deal, and that was huge. But they still have a couple other ways they can make salary cap room. But at this point, I mean, what are guys looking for, right? What's the money value of these guys? Or what does Michael Thomas want at this point in the offseason? What does Justin Simmons want? I mean, obviously, role's important, money is important. But to me, it just feels like they can still do this youth thing, and they have opportunities. Baltimore has about $6-ish million in cap space right now. I think it would be great if the Ravens went out there and got a Justin Simmons or got a Michael Thomas, got a Dalton Reisner. Those would be, I think, winning players. And it doesn't have to be like a 5-year, $60 million deal. These can be 1, 2, 3-year contracts. And who knows, maybe there are guys that get cut before the preseason starts. Obviously, they're going to be, after preseason ends, cap casualties. That happens with every team. And there's a guy that becomes available where maybe you're like, oh, didn't expect this guy to be here. And if you're Baltimore saying, let's try to scoop this guy up. So plenty of options for the Ravens. Do they absolutely need to add more? Like, if they don't, are they in trouble? I mean, no, there are risks, but at the end of the day, I do think it's in their best interest to add a couple of veterans before the start of the year. Coming up, though, we'll be talking about OTAs. They've officially begun. We got a bunch of looks at a bunch of different Ravens. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big one of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So we know the Ravens will go to Arrowhead in Week 1 to play the Kansas City Chiefs. A huge matchup, one of the bigger matchups of the entire NFL season, honestly, just in Week 1 opening game. The Ravens opened up as 2.5-point underdogs in that game over on FanDuel. So if you want to get in on those odds, I'm sure that line will be changing over the next couple of months for the game. You can do that over on FanDuel. So with all the Ravens scheduled games, you can go bet on spreads. You can do Lamar Jackson props. They have plenty of options over on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still here talking with you on this Tuesday. Again, can't say enough how much I appreciate all the support here on Locked On Ravens. Everybody tuning in, whether you're an everyday or you listen to the show every single day. Thank you for tuning in and sticking with me here on Locked On Ravens. If you're new to the channel, new to the show, welcome in. Hopefully you enjoy the content and hopefully you stay a while. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back to the show. Be sure to subscribe, video form, audio form, however you listen. It's the same show. But if you want to watch one day, listen another, you're not missing out on any content. Again, 5 days per week of daily Ravens content, Monday through Friday. Plus, we do go live after every piece of Ravens big news. We go live after every single Ravens game. I'm starting a new, I don't want to call it a segment, a new show where we're going to do day of game episodes. We're going to have those out. So game day episodes, 6 a.m. bonus. That's going to be really fun. So be sure to stay tuned for that before the season starts and during the season as well. Let's talk about OTAs. Again, the offseason never sleeps. You know, we can talk about, there are lull periods in the offseason for the NFL, but the NFL is a 365-day thing. And as our guest Kadri Ismail says all the time, you know, there is the playing part of the NFL season. There's the business part of the NFL season, but there's no off season. Shout out to Q, by the way. His son, Kadir, we talked about him on our undrafted episode. He's signed. The Ravens signed him to their 90-man. That's huge. He's a 6'6" wide receiver. So speaking of huge, 6'6". And I know Q's super proud. We'll have him on later in the week to talk about it and everything. So another step for Kadir. Again, Kadir Ismail, former Samford wide receiver, Villanova quarterback, actually. And now he is a member of the Ravens 90-man. So that's exciting for him. And OTAs officially kicked off yesterday. We saw Derrick Henry for the first time in a Ravens uniform, so that was fun. Him and Roquan Smith walked out together. You know, the Ravens, their social team does an awesome job with getting the content out and just giving an inside look at what the Ravens are doing. And, you know, you see Roquan Smith and Derrick Henry walk out of the tunnel, and, you know, those are going to be tone setters, right? I think those are your offensive and defensive tone setters. Roquan obviously has been Baltimore's defensive tone setter for these last couple of seasons, and, you know, his mindset. And my favorite thing was when the schedule came out, you know, everybody was talking about, the Ravens have 3 games in 10 days. And this is so unfair. And Roquan Smith was just like, line him up, let's go. He's ready to go out there and hit somebody. So that to me is just, you know, peak Roquan Smith. Then Derrick Henry on the offensive side of the ball. I think for a lot of people, it still doesn't necessarily feel very real that Derrick Henry is a member of the Ravens. I mean, look, he was a lifelong Tennessee Titan, going to go down as a legend over there, but he brings elements. We've talked about it, what Derrick Henry brings to the table. So to see him in a Ravens uniform, it's just, it's really cool. And then there are a bunch of pictures of him. And there was one the Ravens posted actually of Derrick Henry running behind Patrick Ricard, something that we talked about here on Locked On Ravens. And a bunch of people are buzzing about it because those are 2 big guys rolling downhill at you. I mean, and I put it out on Twitter. I'm just like, Patrick Ricard and Derrick Henry, they're running directly at you. What are you doing in this situation? And everybody's like, yeah, moving out of the way or accepting my fate, running away. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult for some of those smaller defensive players to find rhythm in that game, especially when Baltimore goes with their heavy personnel. Ricard is somebody that has established himself as one of the better fullbacks in this game, and Henry obviously one of the better running backs in this game. So I think it works out for him there as well. Now we're going to hear from John Harbaugh, the coaching staff as well. I think for Todd Monken, it's going to be Monken, and I believe Zach Orr is going to be talking as well. Just I think Harbaugh is tomorrow, so Harbaugh's talking Wednesday, and then I think everybody else, so Monken, et cetera, they're going to be talking Thursday. And again, for Tom Monken, first time, I think, since the AFC Championship game that he's spoken to the media. So I know we don't want to forget about it. I know it's something we put very far back in our minds and try not to bring it out. I mean, look, I'm a Denver Nuggets guy, and they painfully lost Game 7. And by the way, I recorded yesterday's episode of Locked On Ravens before that game happened. And so in the FanDuel ad read, I was like, I'm either going to be really happy or really upset. And I was going through it. It was unfortunate. But again, you want to put those moments away and just never think about them again. But unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily work that way. So I'm sure there'll be a bunch of questions to Todd Monken. We saw Rashad Bateman back at the facility. Obviously, one of the bigger storylines was he wasn't there for voluntary workouts a couple weeks ago, but he's back with the team. So that's exciting. Him and Nelson Aguilar were videoed running out there on the field. Linderbaum back. So exciting stuff. I mean, again, it's just like step by step to getting to the NFL season in a way where it's like you check. It's like I mentioned it before. It's like a checklist where season ends for the Super Bowl. You get free agency a couple weeks after that. You get the little lull period there, but free agency, the early stages are a couple weeks. Then you get the draft, and then you get rookie mini camp and the schedule release, which is now a huge thing, and OTAs, workouts. So step by step, we're getting closer to Ravens football season. But that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Coming up tomorrow, of course, more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Be sure to subscribe, video form and audio form for, again, 5 days a week Ravens content. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.